What's going on, guys? Welcome into Talking Tide. This is Week 5 review, and two things, actually. This is the second time I've recorded this because the first time my recording got corrupted. And the second thing, which kind of follows the first, my voice is shot. So I apologize for that. Recording two podcasts in a row doesn't help it, and neither did the game last night. But after this, I'm definitely going to go take a NyQuil or some kind of cough drop, and hopefully that'll make me feel better. But what made me did feel better was Alabama went out and beat Georgia 41-34 last night. That's a good segue right there. Um, Welcome to the show. This is Talking Tide. If you haven't been here before, what we're going to do, we're going to go through the first couple of SEC games, and then obviously we're going to talk about the big one, Bama, Georgia, in Tuscaloosa. So we'll get it underway, and so I can go and drink something cold and make myself feel better. All right, game number one. We got a couple of easy games this season or for this week. SEC play really did come into its own though, so that's good. Mississippi State took on Texas in Austin. Texas ran away with this one 35-13. Still without Quentin Ewers, but Arch Manning got the job done. 3 for 324 and 2 touchdowns. Texas were never going to lose this game. Mississippi State is in a tough spot right now. They're 1-4, 0-2 in SEC play, so they've got a lot of work to be done, and they do not have an easy schedule. Let's pull up actually their schedule. They play Georgia next week, so they'll be 1-5. Then they play Texas A&M. Texas A&M should get that win, but it's Texas A&M, so you never know. Actually, I do apologize. They play Georgia in 2 weeks. They have a bye week next week. Then they go to Arkansas. Or they play Arkansas at home, Massachusetts, Tennessee, Missouri, and Ole Miss. Those are the last three games. You can pretty much just write them off as L's for Mississippi State. They're in a tough spot. I don't see them making a bowl game. They've got a tough run right now. As far as teams in the SEC that are probably bottom of the SEC, I think they might eclipse Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt might have jumped them. But you never know how the rest of the season will play out. But Mississippi State's in a tough spot. A team that's not in a tough spot, however, LSU beat South Alabama. Coming into this game, LSU played an okay game against UCLA last week, able to get a win. South Alabama had been on fire. They've put up, maybe 160, 170 points in the last two games. This was a little bit of a banana peel game going in for LSU. I didn't see them losing, especially at home, but it's one of those ones that could kind of slip if you make a mistake or two, and then you're in a dogfight with a team that can put up a lot of points. LSU ended up winning that game 42-10. They were never going to lose it. Nussmeier threw for 26 for 39, 409 yards, 2 touchdowns, and they tacked on 128 more on the ground. So they were never really going to lose that game. They had it in control in what could have been a little bit of a banana peel spot. So good for them. They got the win. Another game that, honestly, if you hate somebody, let them, well, I say that. Don't let them go watch this football game. But Texas A&M played Arkansas. It was an ugly football game. It was not an enjoyable game to watch, especially if you're an Arkansas fan. They jumped out ahead 14-7 in the first quarter. It was a tie ball game going into the second half, and a total of 10 points was scored by either team in that second half. So it was not a pretty football game, but with Texas A&M this year, I don't think they're going to play a lot of attractive football. But they're 4-1. They're 2-0 in SEC play. They fell week 1 to Notre Dame, but they've started to turn their season around a little bit. We'll see if they can keep it going forward. Arkansas, they're in a weird spot. Initially they played a good game against Pine Bluff. Again, it's not really much of a game. They're 70-0. Lost to Oklahoma State in a game that they should have won. Beat UAB, beat Auburn, then lost to A&M. They very well should be 4-1 had they not thrown it away against Oklahoma State. The problem for them is they have a tough run of games in their own right going forward. They play Tennessee next week. They play LSU. Then they play Mississippi State. Should get a win there. Then Ole Miss, Texas, and then Missouri to finish out the season. They play Louisiana Tech in between Texas and Missouri. But it's a tough run of games. It always is in the SEC. And if you can't find your stride, it's going to be tough for Arkansas going forward. For Texas A&M, sneaky spot right now, 4-0, 2-0 in SEC play. They play Missouri next week. Missouri is going to be one of those games where Yeah, they've got a good defense, but they're not as strong as I think people had believed they were to begin the season. And I think that Notre Dame L and Texas A&M's resume is hurting them a little bit, but it's not a conference loss. It still kind of overshadows, I think, some of the good things that they've done going forward. Beat Florida, beat Arkansas. Next week is going to be very telling for Texas A&M football. Let's see who we got next. Here's one I love to laugh at. Oklahoma went into Auburn and beat them 27-21. Now, I like to be impartial on this show. I like to be non-biased. Auburn is in a terrible spot. Like, they are in... I know Mississippi State is in a bad spot. Auburn is in probably the worst spot in the SEC right now. And that's not hyperbole. They beat Alabama A&M. They beat New Mexico State. Those are the 2 wins they have this year. They've lost to Cal, Arkansas, and now Oklahoma. Granted, Oklahoma is a better team than I would say. Well, they're a better team than Cal. I don't know if they're a better team than Arkansas, but that's a discussion for another day. The problem is when you go out there and you look at the rosters, Oklahoma is missing its top 5 wide receivers, and you still cannot stop them on offense. And I think one of the biggest play-ins that also is if you keep giving the ball away, you're not going to win football games. And Auburn cannot stop giving the ball away. Thorne did a better job yesterday than he has in the past against Brent Venables' defense. It's never easy to really beat. Went 21 of 32, 338, 3 touchdowns and 1 pick. The problem is that pick came at a very important time, and it was a pick 6. So it's just in crucial times, Auburn cannot hold on to the football. Oklahoma didn't do anything spectacular, and apparently they didn't need to. They went 10 of 15, 161 through the air. Hawkins had 69 on the ground also, so they didn't do anything spectacular. They finally broke the 200-yard mark, which they hadn't all season, so that's a positive for them going forward, and the defense got a touchdown that won them the football game. If you're Auburn, I don't know where you go from here. Peyton Thorne is, I would say, a better quarterback than Hank Brown, but it's tough coming for Auburn now. Their run of games is not an easy one either. It's not going to get any easier. They play Georgia next week, and they play Missouri. They are both away in both of those games, and they play Kentucky, who's proved to be a good competitor now. Then they play Vandy, UL Monroe, A&M, and then they finish at Alabama. So it's not going to get easier for them. They're 2-3. I see them winning 5 games maybe at the end of this year. Oklahoma in a lot better spot than Auburn, obviously. But, again, like I said, they weren't phenomenal, but they got the job done. 1 loss on their resume at Tennessee. They played Texas, South Carolina, Ole Miss. A tough run of games, no doubt, but games that if they can find a way to click on offense a little bit better, they're winnable. The problem is I don't think they have the weapons to do so. Jackson Arnold got benched, and it didn't look a lot better for them. Michael Hawkins is a little bit more of a dual threat, I think, than Jackson Arnold, so that gave them a little bit of depth in their offense, but they got to figure out what they're doing going forward in the quarterback situation, and so do Auburn. The thing is, for Oklahoma, they don't give the ball away as much as Auburn does. So congrats to Oklahoma on the win. Going and getting a away win in SEC play is never easy. So congrats to them. Congrats to Kentucky. Wow, my voice is gone. They got a win against Ole Miss at Ole Miss. First time since they've, I think, been a double-digit underdog and won or being a top 10 team since like the 80s. So congrats to them. It was one of those performances from Ole Miss where it just was not clicking, and they have performances like this every single year. I don't know when it ever falls in the year, but they just cannot get the ball going on offense. Dart had a good enough game, you'd say, but didn't put up his classic numbers. And I know everybody's going to say, look at who Kentucky has played, or who Ole Miss has played to start this year. And I agree with you. They have played not very good football teams, but you can only beat who's in front of you. And they've done that handily so far. And then they go and play their first, I would say, real test, and they lose. So what does it mean for Ole Miss going forward? It means you lost to a SEC opponent, which is never great because now, if you don't know, the SEC is no longer division. It's just the top 2 make it. And going 0-1 in conference play to start out is not good. You play South Carolina, then at LSU, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi State. So it's not the hardest run of games going in. But when you lose to a team like Kentucky, who kind of notoriously has not really had an offense this year, and then you look at a team like LSU, you look at a team like Georgia, that's going to be two really hard hurdles to get over. If you get over those, you've got a real good shot to try and make it to Atlanta. I don't see them beating Georgia right now. We'll know more after the next 2 weeks, especially when they go play at LSU. We'll know a lot more about this team. It's hard to really tell when you play Furman, MTSU, Wake, and Georgia Southern as your first 4 games. You can't really judge a football team on that. You can judge them on losing to Kentucky, who was a double-digit underdog, but they'll play South Carolina next week, so I'll say we'll know a little bit more about them then as far as what they can do going forward. But, yeah, it wasn't pretty for Ole Miss, and it wasn't pretty for Kentucky, but it looks a lot nicer when you win. And so congratulations to Kentucky for that game. All right, I'm going to get onto this Bama game before my voice is completely gone, if it's not already. Bama beat Georgia in, and I say this with no hyperbole, in the best game of the year. And that's just full stop. It was an instant classic. It was, I said, probably the second best game I've ever been to. The only one that tops it is watching Jalen Hurts beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. It was a tale of two halves, again, which has been a running theme this year so far, not just for Alabama, but teams around college football. I'll start with the first half and say, if Bama plays like that every single time, we beat everybody in the country, bar none. It was great, and I looked at my brother who was there when I said this. It looked like a Kalen DeBoer offense with a full playbook. I said earlier in the year, when we played Wisconsin, we played USF, and we played Western Kentucky, we're not going to open up the playbook till week 4, or technically week 5, our 4th game against Georgia. And he opened up the playbook, and it worked, and it worked, and it worked. Jalen was on fire. He was the best I've ever seen him. All the work he's put in the offseason has paid off for him, and I'm really happy for that guy. It doesn't get talked about enough. That pass to Jam Miller on the wheel route, the touch and the precision you had to throw that football was ridiculous. I remember watching it from behind, and when Jam went out on the wheel, he started all the way on the left, came around. You could see that he was probably going to go out there on the wheel, and I thought to myself, with where the defender was positioned, there is no way that Jalen fits this ball in there, and he did. That's not a throw that we've seen Jalen Miller make in the past, and it should really concern other teams. Another thing that should concern other teams is the speed of Jalen. That run that he made, tightrope down the sideline, Jam Miller with a great block, by the way, blew up the defender and opened up that run for Jalen. The speed he had to tightrope and then just accelerate away from nobody was catching him on that run. He is going to be a logistics nightmare going forward for other teams. Another guy that's going to be a logistics nightmare, and he's gotten full praise and he deserves all of it, is Ryan Williams. Ryan Williams came into this year a little bit of drama, on whether he was going to commit to Bama or go to Auburn or whatever it was. And in my head, I was like, yeah, this kid's going to be really good. I hope after all this drama, he can live up to the hype. And he has lived up to the hype. I saw a statistic the other day. His numbers compared to what Devontae Smith's Heisman numbers were, they are stride for stride. And I say this with no real bias. He is a legitimate Heisman contender as a freshman, and it is not even a debate. There's going to be a lot of guys that get thrown up there, but he is without a doubt. Him and Jalen both are Heisman contenders, or they should be. To do that at 17 years old is insane. That guy should be playing against 15 and 16-year-olds right now. But he's doing it against one of the best teams in the country in Georgia. We'll go to the defense now a little bit. One thing I love coming out of this game, it's again, especially in this first half, was it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, but the secondary confused Carson Beck. He was a deer in the headlights in that first half. We threw him so many different looks in coverage. whether it was bringing guys, dropping zone, man, whatever it was, he was genuinely perplexed by what we were doing on defense. He could not find the right reads. He threw a horrible interception. And it genuinely looked like he was a guy who was out there on an island a little bit. Fair play to him. He came back in the second half and played an awesome second half. You knew Georgia was going to make adjustments, and they did. Now, the double-edged sword part of that was, for Bama, you didn't get a lot of pressure. And that was the one thing I said all night long, especially in that first half. We're not getting a lot of pressure. They're going to eventually find reads and find soft spots in that coverage, especially with a young secondary, that it could hurt us going down the line. Now, I want to say we had one sack and one forced safety, essentially, because we brought the house on him. And that was the only two times I can really think of us getting any pressure on Beck. So that's something we have to work at going forward. The edge rushers are good, but they're not quite as elite as they have been in the past. We don't quite have that speed on the edge. And that being said, we only brought 4 all night. I think the times we did bring 5, and then we brought, I want to say, 7 or 8, we got pressure. So anytime we brought a little bit more heat, we were able to get some pressure on them, but that obviously opens you up a little bit more on the back end. That was only that, and the only other negative I could say was on the turnover, we went and gave the ball right back. It was unfortunate. Dupree got hit on a catch, and it just kind of popped into Georgia's hands. So we weren't able to capitalize on turnovers. But other than that, when DeBoer has a wide-open playbook and he has guys out there that can execute like we did, we can beat anybody in the country. I say all that to say this. I think in the second half of that football game, that playbook was cut in half, if not cut by like 2/3. We tightened up a lot. It wasn't until we really had to start stretching the ball, we started stretching the ball again, and it worked twice. Ryan Williams made 2 unbelievable catches, one for a game-winning touchdown. I think that we played very, very safe. And the thing is, if you go out there and you get 2 stops on 4th down against Georgia, it's a different ball game. They were able to move the ball on 4th down time and time and time again, whether, we got one holding call, which I think was unfortunate. And again, when you play 4 downs versus 3 downs, it's a lot harder to stop a team, especially like Georgia, who's physical and who has a lot of skill up front. I think that if you get 2 of those stops, it's a different ball game, but we didn't. And then the other big problem was we were not able to sustain drives, which is one thing we kind of talked a little bit about throughout this whole year is, yeah, we can hit them with the big shot. Can we sustain a drive? And we did in the first half. We sustained drives very, very well in the first half. There was a couple of instances where, it was everything underneath. And one of the things that I didn't love in the first half was, we tried to set up a couple of trick plays, a couple of double passes, which didn't pan out. I don't mind that type of thing on 2nd down and 1, 2nd down and 3, whatever it is. We did them on 1st and 10, which I didn't love. One thing I do love as a caveat to that is it shows that DeBoer is confident with this team. It shows that he's willing to throw a bunch of stuff at a hard team like Georgia and see what's going to stick. And most of it did. I just didn't like those 2 plays. But going forward, I think with DeBoer's confidence in this team, because coaching, like football, is as much confidence as it is skill. If you have confidence in your guys to go out there and play football like they did, go out there, try and throw a double pass, see what happens. And like I said, we ate up Georgia underneath and with the run all night long. I think that Georgia was really playing so we couldn't take the top off the game. And I think that was a little bit of an attempt to unlock that deep ball with a double pass, maybe trying to confuse somebody and pop one over the top. But I love the confidence in DeBoer to do that. I just didn't love the time that we called it. Anyway, getting back to that second half, if we get a couple of stops on 4th down, it's a different ball game. I don't think that most teams couldn't go. What they go like 7 for 7 on 4th downs. Most teams can't do that against Bama. Georgia was able to do so because they got a couple of 4th and 2s, 4th and 5, 4th and 3, stuff like that. But for Bama, we gotta clean that up. Got to be able to get off the field on defense a little bit better. But overall, I think that defense played a good football game. I don't know how they were still standing. It felt like they were on the field for 28 minutes in that second half. So fair play to them for keeping up and eventually winning us the football game. That's kind of the basis stuff. People are going to talk about Ryan Williams and Jalen Milroe and all this kind of stuff, and fairly so. Like, they played a phenomenal game. Fair play to the offensive line. They did a much better job protecting Milroe. I don't think he got sacked all night. He may have got one sack, but with what legs he has and what he can do with his legs, it makes it hard to sack him anyway. And when you have a good offensive line in front of him, it makes it doubly so. I think that our offensive line has proven that when it's healthy, it can be really, really good. Maybe not best in the country, but really, really good. Especially with a team with how many skill players we have. If it's good enough, you can win a lot of football games like that. So we got to stay healthy on the front. But again, I just wanted to give credit to the offensive line. They did a great job. Two things I want to talk about that were kind of my undercurrent takeaways of the game. Something that wasn't really written, or you didn't see it outright. The first one was, and it has to go back to Kalen DeBoer. This is the first time you've played Georgia as Alabama, from a coaching standpoint. And to go out there and have the confidence in his team to open up the playbook and play and call the plays that he did shows a lot of confidence. I think that whenever this team was taken over by DeBoer and the new staff in Bama, it kind of felt, and I think I said this earlier in the year, it felt a little bit soft from a coaching standpoint, like the USF game. It felt a little bit soft. Like we didn't have that fire on the sideline as much. And it took me a little while to think about it, but I feel like it was something of inheriting somebody else's baby. Like you were given a baby and you're like, all right, well, we got to be gentle and caring and need to make sure that we sustain this legacy, but you also have to write a legacy of your own. And going out and beating Georgia in the fifth week of the season, the first time you played them, is writing that legacy. I think that, and there were moments in this game too, like on the pass interference, or what should have been a pass interference call, DeBoer chewed out the ref. And I don't know if it was on TV after the game, or after the end of the half. There was a little bit of a scrum, and we got a 15-yard penalty flag thrown on us, and DeBoer chewed him out again, and he went over to do his interview, and then he went back and chewed him out. And stuff like that, not only for the players, but as fans, that wins you over right there. You are a coach that the fans like and the guys want to play for. And at the end of the day, that showed. It was something interesting that I listened to where, I can't remember who said it, but it was when you have a guy like Kalen DeBoer come into a program that was run by the greatest head coach of all time, the greatest dynasty of all time, what's still the standard of college football, it takes a certain type of guy to do that, to say, I'll take that risk. Where if you go anywhere else in the country, an 8-win season, a 9-win season is considered a success. At Bama, it's not, at least not in the past. So it takes a certain type of guy to go in there and do that. And I think for the players, they realize that, and they want to go out and they want to go to war for this guy. It feels like a family atmosphere. It feels like everybody out there cares about everybody. They want to fight for each other. And they want to win with each other. There have been teams in the past that hadn't felt like that. So I think to be able to put that together in your first year, and then to go out and call the game that he called, it shows a lot of confidence from DeBoer. And to me, it shows that he and the other coaches are no longer like coddling somebody else's baby, but they're trying to write their own story now, which is great. And Nick Saban's legacy is never going to be overtaken. It's never going to be overshadowed by what DeBoer does, especially in the first few years. But for DeBoer and the staff to go out there and this is the first chapter in writing their own legacy, I feel like that is huge for us as a program and for them as coaches to carry us forward and into this rest of the season and seasons going forward. So I think that was one big takeaway from the game. The second big takeaway from the game, if you know anything about recruiting, there were 1 million recruits at this game. It was officially over 100. And as a recruit, you go in there and you look at a program like Bama or Georgia and you say, this is a great football team. They run a great program. But with how college football is nowadays, I'm probably not going to see the field as a freshman. I can go to South Alabama or whatever other smaller college you want to go to, with all respect to South Alabama. Um, Learn how to play football there at a college level, and then maybe, I'll get my shot to transfer to Bama or Georgia or something like that. When you go then watch a 17-year-old kid as a true freshman dominate the game the way that he did, and then Xavier Brown win the football game they had the two biggest impacts in the game in that fourth quarter. And they're both true freshmen. If you look at that as a recruit and you say, you know what? These two guys went out there and they did it as true freshmen, I think I can too. The ability to say that, it's kind of like when Saban was at Bama and he said, you know what? I don't really have to try and convince you to come to Bama. You know what the standard is. Look at all the rings on my finger. Look at all the things that I've done for these guys. Look at all the guys who've won national championships. As a recruiter now, you can go out and you can say, you know what? We played the biggest game of the year, and the two guys that helped us win that football game were true freshmen. And the ability to say that to a recruit is the value of that is unfathomable. And the reaction of the recruits in the stands, there was a video out of Ryan Williams' touchdown. They were losing their minds. It felt like one of those games where you could pick up so many different guys that you may not have been able to pick up before. And even, whether it's Bama or Georgia, but it felt like it could have been a big turning point in recruiting for either side, whoever went out and won it. But especially when you go out and you win it with two guys who are true freshmen making huge impacts in a football game. So those were kind of the two undercurrent takeaways, maybe the less talked about takeaways in this football game. I think that going forward, Bama's going to be full of confidence. We play Vanderbilt next week. Should be able to go out and, again, stretch our legs. We walked out of that game with no injuries that I really know of. Cole Adams came back. That's a huge win for depth. Also, I got to say, one thing I love, I was looking at stats earlier today. We had 11 guys catch the football this game, or yesterday. I love that. It shows that we just don't have to go to one guy in Ryan Williams to win us a football game. We can spread the ball out. We have a lot of pre-snap movement with that DeBoer offense. So I think being able to spread the ball out is very valuable for us. And now that Jalen, he was processing his reads, he was going through his looks. His pre-snap read was better. So I think going forward, we will be full of confidence that coaching staff seems like they are starting to take over the program. They're starting to write their own story there, and so are the players. So I think going forward, we're in a really good spot. Obviously beating Georgia is a big thing, but beating them in your first ever meeting as a head coach at Alabama, that says a lot for Kalen DeBoer and that coaching staff and that football team. So congratulations to the Tide. Commiserations to Georgia. They're still a great football team. They're not going anywhere. Kirby Smart runs a great program over there. I don't think they're going to be struggling to get wins this year. We very well may likely see them again in Atlanta. I think that's going to do it. I appreciate you guys for jumping on. I don't think there's anything else I really wanted to talk about in this game. I appreciate you guys jumping on. Sorry it was a little bit shorter. My voice is absolutely cooked after yesterday. Also, fair play to the fans. It was loud in that stadium. If you were there, it was genuinely deafening. I can't imagine what it was like on the field. So good for the fans. There have been times I've been to games and we haven't been as loud as maybe we should have been. But yesterday the fans showed up. And again, that plays so much into what recruits see at games, just what the genuine perception of Alabama is. We got to make sure that it doesn't fall just because Saban isn't there. And again, his legacy will forever be written at Alabama. There's no doubt about that. But it's definitely down to the fans and the players to continue to uphold that legacy, and they did that yesterday. They took a huge step in writing the first chapter in the DeBoer era. So I think that's going to do it. I'm going to go take me some NyQuil and probably get some dinner and take a cough drop. So I can actually talk about football later this week. I appreciate you guys jumping in. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Don't forget the like button. Hopefully I didn't have too many voice cracks in this thing, but if I did, they're definitely going to go up on Instagram. So everybody can get a good laugh out of that. I hope you guys enjoyed. Great win. We'll see how we do next week at Vandy. Should be able to get a pretty good win against the Vandy team that's okay. We'll talk about them a little bit later this week. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. I always appreciate it. Don't forget that follow button and the subscribe. Or don't forget the like button and the subscribe button. Yeah, that's gonna do it. You guys have a good night. Roll Tide.